This week, a commentary on internet culture, Crowded, written by Christopher Sebela with art from Stein, Ted Brandt, Triona Farrell, and Cardinal Rae, the letterer. Kumar and Emmet discuss, is the story plausible, in keeping with the best science fiction? But first, help keep this podcast coming out weekly. Support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. With your pledge of at least $4 a month, you can access hours of bonus podcasts, including an issue-by-issue discussion of The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko. Pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Okay, shall we get into this thing? Do you want to do the intro for this one, since it was your book?
Okay, dokie.
Yeah.
All right. So what am I doing?
I love this already. We should leave this in the show. This is so good. You say this is Emmet. I say this is Kumar, and you say this is Deconstructing Comics, and then you say where you are and where I am, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. I'll jump in if necessary.
Good. All right, we'll do that then. This is Emmet.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. This is Emmet in regional Victoria, and I'm joined on the line by Kumar over in Melbourne. How are things, Kumar?
Yeah, good. Yeah, all good.
And tonight we are going to be talking about Crowded, which Kumar reminded me we had on our list, our secret list, listeners, which you won't get to see, of books we wanted to talk about. And Crowded was... I mean, this review was done on a coin toss, but I was very happy when it came up heads, because I think I was ranting about Crowded for months there last year.
Now, this was your selection, so you're familiar with this series.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I read the first volume last year, early last year, and I loved it. I had a really good time with it. Spoilers for the discussion to come. And I think I took to the internet. I took to social medias, and I tried to shout it from the rooftops. I was like, everybody should be reading Crowded. This is great. And that's not an unusual opinion to have. I've noticed there's lots of really positive reviews out there, lots of support for the book. It's gotten awards. It's gotten award attention. It's got a prospective movie coming out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
With Australian actor Rebel Wilson producing and possibly starring, although there's no information about that in the wires that I can see. So at the very least, I hope that Christopher Sebela, Stein, Ted Brandt, Triona Farrell, Cardinal Rae, the whole team behind Crowded actually got a paycheck from Hollywood for that adaptation. Maybe we'll see it on screen someday. But yeah, I'm really happy to talk to somebody about Crowded, because I just want to talk about it so much.
Okay. And the other thing about it, so there's 12 issues. Now, when we came into this, I've never heard of this series before, and I looked at it started in 2018, and I saw there were 12 issues, so I thought, okay, it must be finished, but it's not finished. It's
not finished.
And
in fact, I just finished volume 2 this week.
Okay.
I had it on my bedside table for ages. I was savoring it. This is the kind of, when I really like something, I don't read it. I wait. Delayed gratification. But because we were doing this discussion, I was like, I should actually read the second volume, so I have that context and I have a sense of where the story is going.
Okay.
And it does end on a bit of a cliffhanger. The second volume. So I can't wait to see where this goes next.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the deeper discussion, but I would say to anybody who's going to read it, don't go in thinking that issue 12 is the last one, because
correct.
I was like, I just thought it was this structurally completely messed up, and I was about to complain about it until I got to the end and then realized it wasn't the end. Because, I guess when we get in, when we get into the details of the plot, the reasons for my confusion will become clear. But when they end up should we talk about the plot? I guess I don't know how to talk around this. It's about basically it's the near future, I guess, and there's a thing called you can get crowdfunded assassinations on this app called Reaper, or website called Reaper, and so this girl is a young woman is
Charlie Ellison.
Charlie Ellison,
which I think is a deliberate rhyming allusion to Harlan Ellison. With his whole Dangerous Minds, that whole sort of near future fantasist stuff that he did for a while.
Yeah. Right, and then in issue 12, they're like in this abandoned missile silo bunker kind of place, and I was like, why is this assassination story ending here, climaxing here? And it was really baffling me for the last issue, and it's not the case. So I'm going to preempt my own confusion about that and say that it was my not reading it, not finding out anything about the series before going in, and assuming that since I guess it's been a year since the issue 12 came out, that it was done, but apparently it's not. But it's not canceled or anything, right? As far as we know, it's still going?
I believe it's still going, okay. And what do you see? It's an Image title as well, so it is dependent on sales and the creators having the finances.
Right.
So, again, I think this is why this story of Rebel Wilson getting the rights for a film is so relevant, because hopefully that will give the series the injection to keep going.
Right.
You know, not everything the Image puts out is like The Walking Dead, where you've got like multi-market success across all sorts of different mediums. Comics need to be read, need to be sold, need to be talked about, and I think this is one of those books which is critically acclaimed in certain quarters, and certainly has a very strong and passionate fan base. But it's the kind of book that I want more people to be reading, because I think it's telling an interesting story. I want to see where it's going, and I want it to stay alive, basically.
Okay.
I misspoke earlier. Sorry, I said Harlan Ellison's collection of stories that I think might be relevant to this. It's Dangerous Visions, is the one I was thinking of. Sorry.
Right. Okay, where do we want to start with this thing?
Well, I think you were on track there. So you've got the character Charlie.
Yeah.
And she's very much enmeshed in the gig economy. There's some like elevator pitch to the series. You know, this is Charlie. She's got 20 jobs. You know, and she's basically living on her phone because she's got all these apps that she makes money off of, doing little tasks and jobs around the city. And then she discovers that a hit's been put out on her, this crowdsourced public hit service, Reaper, and she has to go on the run because someone's put $1 million bounty on her head. And she finds Vita through another app called Defend, and Vita has the lowest ranking, and apparently, you know, has been almost drummed out of the personal protection racket as a result of this. But it turns out she's actually really awesome at keeping people alive. But because of a deep, dark secret in her past, that's why she's so low in the rankings. And they are joined together. Vita keeps her alive, and she's to keep her alive for 30 days. Meanwhile, everyone in the world is trying to kill Charlie, and in a world where everything is on the internet and people are completely detached from reality, just living in virtual space all the time, life is cheap, and a lot of people die in this book in lots of bright, colorful ways. And it's almost reminiscent of this extraordinary sequence in the first Kingsman movie, which gets quite psychedelic. It's a very violent scene. There's a scene of a lot of death, but it's shot through with this beautiful amount of color. And one of the main things that I love about Crowded is Triona Farrell's use of color. So that sort of I hope that gives people a sense of what they're getting into. It's violence, but in a very sort of offhand, funny way.
I think the art was the thing I liked most about it. It's got a very, it's almost like a Don Bluth or Ralph Bakshi style character designs. They're very cartoony, in literally like Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones type drawings. And there's some amazing sequences. There's like anytime there's a crowd scene, or there's one scene where a different assassin pulls up this grid of faces on her, laptop screen or whatever, and every face is really different, but in a cartoon way. And every crowd scene, everybody's got a different face, and everybody's got their own body language, and the art is really great in that respect. And it does, it is very frenetic, like as you described, especially the violence scenes, and because of the way the plot is structured, it's very interesting, because anytime you want to have an attack, it's so easy. You can drop one in at any moment you want, because you can just say, okay, guess what? They found out, the public has found out where the target is. Suddenly there's an attack, and we can have 5 or 10 pages or 1 page of violence, however much you want, before you move on. So it's a kind of ingenious structural trick where they can just drop that in whenever they want. They can just make that excuse that, here comes some more. They figured out where we are. Here come some more people.
Yeah. And because everyone's being surveilled all the time. And one of the major problems that Vita has with Charlie is that she just won't stay off her phone. Like, she's checking into things. And Charlie's behavior, I mean, the major secret of the series is, why would someone want to spend $1 million to kill her? And as the series progresses and the 30-day deadline approaches, the amount of money increases.
Well, we should also say why it's 30 days. And this is going to go into, now I'm going to say up front, I like this book. I think it's a really good comic. I'm going to sound like I'm complaining or nitpicking about a lot of things in this episode. But one of the things is this app called Reaper, it's not strictly legal, but the feds seem to turn a blind eye to it. I can't remember quite what the logic was. That is explained. I just, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think
it literally was a matter of the paperwork.
Right.
They just couldn't be bothered dealing with the paperwork. Right. And I will be honest, like, having spent some time, working for government in various capacities, one thing that upset me early on was whenever I was on the periphery of a legal case involving something that happened on the internet. And what bothered me was there was always this jurisdictional thing with the police where they were saying, well, it's on the internet, what can we do? And like I'm talking about things involving students at schools and stuff, and like walking to and from school, and like online bullying and the likes. And there were legal records of this just going, it's too hard. And I kind of feel like that's what Sebela's story is tapping into, which is this idea of law enforcement not really pushed about this kind of stuff.
Right. But there is but if you don't assassinate the person within 30 days, then it's canceled, and you cannot set up a new Reaper for that same person. It's almost like a double jeopardy law. But it's not like Kickstarter where you get to try again if you fail the first time. It's done. Now, there's no, I mean, my question is what's the logic behind that? That this thing is operating outside the bounds of the law, or the law doesn't care anyway, and yet there's some arbitrary rule. Where does that rule come from? So I think the premise is on seesaw that's very carefully balanced.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea of the lottery or the purge or something. You've got some grand release of societal anger and tension one unfortunate person suffering the brunt of it.
Yeah. Well, what do you? Okay, so I guess we'll spoil it a little bit, but her amount gets to $3 million, which is a huge amount. Usually these things apparently don't get up. I can't remember what figure we hear. It might be like $50,000 or something very minor, but hers gets up $3 million. As the series progresses, we learn that it's probably because bots are contributing to a lot of the money that's going in there. But I did wonder about the morality of people. So some people are actually, some live people, not bots, are actually putting money into these assassinations. And that's not really ever examined. They talk about, there's a lot of talking in these books, 12 issues, a lot of talking about feelings and various other things. Nobody really talks about the morality of your average Joe who's going to kick in $15 to have a person murdered. And maybe that's not... Now, maybe I'm wrong about this. Is it not... Would it be out of place for the series to try to do that? Or is that another part of the seesaw where you don't want to look behind that curtain because the premise of the book will fall apart if we try to examine the morality of those contributions?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we sort of, as a society, I think we need to move past this sort of, oh my gosh, people on the internet are absolute monsters shock. At the time of recording, we are, 3 weeks out from an attempted insurrection in Washington, which has been parlayed off as just a lark.
Right.
So, a guy got killed. A woman was shot by police or security, and people walked away from it with this sense of, and have been publicly defended with this sense of, they're letting off a bit of steam. So, I think we now live in a time when this notion of morality as something we all understand as universal, I think that's slipping away from us. I think the Overton window is further and further away from any sense of what you and I and then a random person on the street might consider is the good, and that's what's kind of frightening. And that's what I think Crowded is tapping into with this idea of crowdsourced violence and executions. There's this sense of, you all know what this is about, right? You all know what the internet's like, right? There's a nudge, wink, wink sort of aspect to the writing. And it sort of speaks to a sort of, I probably overuse this phrase in other discussions we've had, but this sort of pop nihilism at the heart of this book. This sense that, humanity's pretty rotten right now. and you need to reckon with that.
I think my point is the opposite. I think that that's kind of it's almost just a gag that these contributions are happening, and I don't think the book sees it as positions it as pop nihilism. I think it's just there. And I don't think there's any examination of it. And I don't think there has to be. This thing I'm myself am wondering, does there need to be or not? Because my thing is, this is not, it's set in the near future, but it's not as, if you had something like Reaper in a comic, which is in this comic, I would expect it to be more in the world of Miller and Darrow's Hard Boiled, which is a super extreme, crazy future that's so extreme, that things are so extreme it's ridiculous. So, I mean, I don't know, have we reached a state, if Reaper existed in the real world, how many people do you think would actually chip in money to it? Are you saying that the world we're now, you think it would happen? And I'm not questioning your judgment on this. I'm just saying, I just want to know what your opinion is. Do you think if it existed, people would actually contribute to it?
I think the real hook of any decent science fiction is for something to be just within the limits of plausibility.
Okay.
And the point I was making is, we respond to this notion of public morality as if it's enshrined in some sort of code, and what we've witnessed this year, and what we've witnessed for years and years and years, and it's just we keep seeming to have the same conversation where we go, oh my god, how shocking,
right?
Is that's not true,
right?
And I'm not making an argument for moral relativism. I'm saying that there are people who will willingly detach themselves from any concern for their fellow man.
Right.
And that's not abnormal. That's not unusual at all. So as much as the idea of public assassinations is a wild and crazy idea, we're perfectly, comfortable with this idea of whole people being victimized publicly, people being attacked publicly, and it being entertainment. We're in fact, we don't even respond that strongly when we learn that an entire racial group has just been vilified. And here's this public figure who represents us in power vilifying the entire racial group, and we go, yeah, I guess, what are you going to do? Oh, we'll try and vote him out next time. That's the level. Whereas actually what this is violence being done. This is violence on a societal level to groups of people, communities. And again, this is kind of, you mentioned Miller and Hardboiled and Darrow and all that kind of stuff. One of the things about Crowded that I enjoy as well is that it's crazy queer. It is it's such a gay book. And I really enjoy that because it just gives this sense of a lived world that maybe science fiction, typically written by men, typically written by straight men, just wouldn't investigate. And there is this attraction between Charlie, who's sort of very, very she's painted with lots of soft colors and bright colors, and she's very soft featured, and then Vita is just all strength, all muscle and action and speed and coiled energy. And somehow when they're together, despite the fact that Charlie's floating through panels and Vita stalks the way she moves very directly, there's this sense of tension between them that goes from annoyance in the typical, meet cute way to, okay, there's something here. There's some sort of libidinal energy here.
Yes, but I do want to say that Charlie, to me, was and this is going to be my biggest complaint about the book. To me, she was so aggravating because she's hired this person to protect her, but does every single thing she does for 12 issues is seemingly to get herself killed. She just makes all the mistakes. She goes out, she uses the phone. When she loses her phone, she steals a phone, etc., etc., etc. Every single thing she does wrong, and she won't shut up. And to me, she was a really frustrating character, and I really felt for Vita, and I was like, oh my god, I just wish the contract, and I wasn't sure why, and I was really struggling to understand why Vita kept the contract going. And it wasn't until they started having sex with each other much later,
spoilers,
spoiler, whatever, yeah, so until that point, so then I had to go back and think, so the reason she's really kept this contract is because she found her attractive. I think she says it's because she has some sort of code where Vito says once she takes contract, she doesn't break it. But come on, maybe.
I think that I also think there is a question not just of professional pride, but also she's in the doldrums. She's got nothing, and now she's in this situation with this person where it could be a killing for her if she actually defends her client in the 30 days. This is the person with 3 million and counting on her head, and Vita kept her safe and had perfect license to kill as many people as she wants for 30 days, and she does do that.
She avoids it though as much as possible, especially early on.
The train scene, just reading the second volume again this week, when I got to the scene on the train, I was kind of flabbergasted by it. I was like, God, this is just so...
But how many people actually died on the train? And one of them was killed by Charlie with a headshot, or two of them were killed by Charlie. And I don't think Vita actually kills.
There was a couple of blows. I was going, I don't think that person's getting back up. Okay. there was a couple of scenes where I was going, okay, wow, she's going for it. No, I'm not saying she's murderous, but she gets to do violence,
right.
And there's probably a thrill there too. And I think that's a part of the attraction between Charlie and Vita, the sense that you make my life interesting.
I think it has to be. I think you're right, and because Vita's life is in danger because of her association with Charlie all the time, and Charlie's stupidity, her constant page after page stupidity, is constantly putting Vita's life in danger, and yet Vita's still there. Now, my feeling.
Okay, I don't. Yeah, Carrie, say what you're going to say, but I'll bring you up on the point of stupidity. But
Okay,
carry on. Say what you're going to say.
My feeling is that by the time they hook up, I don't think there was. If I was in that situation, I'd be furious at this person, and
Right.
every page I would be furious at this person, and I didn't feel like the attraction was strong enough. In the writing, maybe in the artwork, it is with the way you've described it. I mean, the body language is so well done and so drawn so well that you can kind of get it from that. But I definitely felt a disconnect between her. But maybe it's my take on Charlie's personality as well. Is part of the problem with my reading of it.
I've done a quick overview of what people are saying about Crowded, and I did find somebody who I sort of know, an acquaintance, had reviewed it and was quite hung up on Charlie.
Okay.
As well. And I found it fascinating because, and again, I credit the art. I credit Rose Stein and Ted Brandt. Of course, Triona Farrell, because as I mentioned before, the colors make Charlie look incredible. She just floats off the panel. But I also think the sort of animated style that you described before makes her as a character more engaging. The illustrations raise my appreciation of the written character. The character is scripted by Christopher Sebela. Not to knock what Sebela's done with Charlie, because I think Charlie's a really interesting character. And the thing that she reminds me of is that person who you have in your life, and it could be a romance or it could be a friendship. But it's that person you have in your life who when you're out with them, stuff's going to happen. And you also know it's very bad for you to be around this person.
Okay.
But you want to be around this person. And I can speak from experience in that respect. I am familiar with that situation, this idea of I just want to be around you because I can't do the things you do, but when you're around, I get to vicariously enjoy them or get sucked into them. And I question. So I like Charlie for that. I think she, as a character, is not somebody maybe I'd like as a person, but she is a character. I think is a very realized version of that personality type, the personality who creates drama. And for some people, that's exhausting, and I guess I like it. I guess I sort of I'm on that square where I'm going, well, let's have a good time.
Well, that's okay. So this is perfect because exhausting was literally the word I put in my notes.
Sure.
So it really is an individual take between your take on that person and my take on that person, and I would certainly hit a wall. And certainly after 12 issues, around even by issue 6, I was like, I am tired.
But isn't the point that you like the humor of the whole premise is that in this world people will put aside any scruples and willingly sign up to murder a person? Isn't the whole point of Charlie's behavior that makes that more believable for you, the reader?
This is the ugliest I felt about it. I was like, I hope she dies. At certain there were moments when I was like, and despite all my high and mighty sanctimonious comments about the morality of contributing to this assassination campaign, I was like, I think I would. Man,
I knew it. Oh yeah. Look in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. No, I got to the stage where I really didn't care, and I actually I wanted Vita to be free of her. I felt like she was chained down by this woman who would not listen to a single instruction to help her survive, which is the thing she claims to have wanted on page 1 of issue 1. Which, when she meets Vita for the first time and has hired her to protect her, supposedly. She seems to think she knows more about the protection than Vita does, which for me was, as you can tell, frustrating.
Coming up, backgrounds determined by artists rather than the writer, an anticlimactic reveal, the best information dump ever, and more. Unlock more classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics and get access to hours of additional podcasts about MCU movies and the early Amazing Spider-Man issues by Lee and Ditko. Support this podcast and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
And try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
The early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
and follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave.
And stay bold.
I mean, I wonder where this is going. I wonder of the ultimate reveal as to what's really going on here with the hit that's been put out on her, and I'm sure there's a sting in the tail. But I also like that as the series progresses and the sheer extremes of behavior that we see in the members of the public who are lining up to commit murder, and increasingly weird, cultish, and also there's some celebrity chasing going on too. They want to be seen, they want to be known as the killer of Charlie Ellison, like feeding on their live feed to their followers or fans, whatever else you have. So there's all that going on too. But in that process of this society just turning itself over to kill this one person, I think the point is that you realize they're all awful too. Like,
Yes.
they're all monsters and hypocrites. And her point, like Charlie's point, is that I'm entirely selfish because I learned very early on that I had to be, because there's no one there in your corner. There's no one who wants to protect you. And that's probably why she's so dismissive of Vita despite hiring her, because she simply fundamentally can't trust people. And in doing so, in that awareness, she's almost like deliberately pissing people off because she knows what they're really like. Now, I sometimes I feel when we do these discussions, Kumar, we talk about something and, I really like it. I will keep shifting the goalposts until because I want to make my point. So I'm trying to be conscious of that. I think I'm being sincere in I like how the character is written because I recognize that character type, but
Right.
also I think it justifies the extremes of the plot that Sebela has created. And what I wanted to say too, I really don't want us to get through this conversation without hammering this point home. This book is one of the richest collaborative comics experiences that I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned Sebela, we've mentioned Stein, we've mentioned Ted Brandt, we've mentioned Triona Farrell. I should declare, in the interest of full transparency, I've worked with Cardinal Rae, who does the letters. I've worked with Cardinal on a couple of stories myself. She's amazing. She's a really, really great letterer, and she also has amazing feedback on how things should be presented. So I just points to her too. And I was going through my emails with her recently on a separate job, and I found the first email I ever exchanged with her, and I was saying, "Oh, I hear you're doing this book called Crowded. I can't wait to read it." I read it, and I was going, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" Because so much of this comic's about text, like so much of it's about language and like sound and all these sort of indicators of what's going on. Like it's so what I'm saying is every aspect of this book in terms of the collaborative through line is just full blast, full bore brilliance. Like it's all working together. So I just really wanted to flag that. As a sort of ensemble, Crowded's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I love that sometimes when the car is driving, that you can see, and she's listening to jazz music, like the musical notes are coming out of it, and sometimes the sound effects, like of a, like the splash of a toilet flushing, is like the water coming out and forming the letters of splash. And there's all sorts of little bits like that are really cool. I did think in terms of, I mean, everything working together, it's super busy. And there's a lot of dialogue. But I think that, again, that Don Bluth type artwork is really working when you have a page which has so much dialogue on it. But the characters are kind of moving around in this really interesting way. It's not like the Wallywood 22 panels. They are constantly finding ways to move them around in a way that's fun to look at all the time. But you do have to really pay attention because it's so dense with the artwork and the dialogue at the same time. And sometimes, like even in issue 1, I remember there was a point where I got a few pages in and then Vita says, like, you have to pay me back for my belt. I was like, what? What happened to the belt? And then I had to flip back and like, oh yeah, there's this little panel where she's used her belt to seal the doors off or to tie the door handle off. So it's really interesting because I thought, 12 issues, and there's a lot that goes on in every issue, and I did feel at times like, can't we have compressed this to 6? But other times there's so much going on, I felt like, this needed to be 30 to like let it breathe or something. But I guess it's not. I don't think they want to let it breathe. I do think it's a little bit. It's not at hard-boiled levels, of course, but it's super dense. And one of the things I liked was, and I almost wish they'd done, not almost, I do wish they'd gone a lot further with it, is things like the little background details, like the titles of TV shows when they're flipping through channels. There was one that was like, I wrote down some of the titles of these TV shows. They were hilarious. They were like America's Next Top Bottom and RuPaul's Indy 500. I loved it. And God, somewhere Krispy Kremlin turns up as a donut shop. I just thought it was great. All that little stuff, I wish they'd dialed that way up even more than it was. But then I guess maybe it'd be too much like other stuff set in similar near future. Maybe that would have been a cliche. But when they did go there, it was really funny.
Yeah, and I think
he said in the letters that the writer, who's the writer again?
Christopher Sebela.
Okay. Said that stuff was inserted by the artists. So there you go, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to comment that too. I read an interview with him, I think it was on Doom Rocket, and he was talking about how, he really wanted to work with the two folks, and they met through a shared contact, an editor. They started collaborating on the story. He wrote the script, and he broke down the script as far as moment beats. This happens here, this happens here, this happens here. If I'm following what he was saying.
Okay.
And then left Stein and Ted Brandt free to just create the detail.
Okay.
And that's something I actually really appreciate, because I've noticed that, and this is something I was aware of from a young age. And it is that first time you hear. This is your mention of Alan Moore per episode, Kumar. I listened to your review of Hellblazer, and I love that idea. I love that every episode of Deconstructing Comics, someone has to mention Alan Moore at least once.
Yes, and if it's a horror comic, it has to be Lovecraft at least once.
Yeah. So here's your Moore mention. I can't remember how old I was, but I remember the shock when I read for the first time artists complaining about having to work in an Alan Moore script.
Right.
And I was going, why? What's the problem with Alan Moore's scripts? And then what was revealed was that, he just packs each panel with dense description of what's going on. And a lot of it's very novelistic. A lot of it's very sort of, here's the kind of mood I'm trying to evoke. And the artist on a deadline is like, man, I just want to, what's happening? Like, just tell me what's going on in this thing. Like, how many objects are in the panel? Let's start there. Right. And so there is this sense of writers should write, let the artists do what the artists are good at doing. And this is where I got excited about this book as far as collaboration, because I could tell, even before I knew that Sebela had a sort of stripped back approach to scripting, I could tell that there's a degree of invention and creation here that's clearly, artists collaborating freely with a script,
right?
That just says what happens, and then they work with it. One of my favorite sequences in the entire series involves the character of Cersei, and it goes back to this conversation we had just before, the part of our discussion just before, where we were talking about how far away is this kind of behavior from today, what's happening right now, and it's a flashback sequence told entirely through these deconstructed social media platforms, like moments in time. The narration is like captions or comments or visual descriptors on web platform utilities, and each of them is a moment of video or some sort of depiction of the event that's been described, and it's alluding to a life that's been publicly lived through all of these platforms. And the person telling that story has had no control whatsoever over how their life was lived. Cersei. And then it starts getting nastier and nastier, and it's almost as if the violence of Cersei, who is herself an assassin, if I'm understanding correctly, is a proportionate response. Her taking a life is proportionate to the fact that her life has been deconstructed through all of these services and all of these platforms and all of these sort of ways of sharing moments of time for mass consumption. Like, she has been reduced to bits of data. That's what that sequence is about.
Yeah. And
I thought that was incredible. It's like one of my favorite sequences. Incredible concept, really well executed.
Yeah, I also think the other thing about it is I think she's the best. Well, she was my favorite character, even though she's hardly in it. And I think it was maybe because she got first-person narration boxes, which even the two main characters don't get. But we get captions of her speaking to the reader, so to speak. And I think we kind of she was more deeper, and those sections were more poetic.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're more metaphorical. I didn't quite get why she showed up at the airport and killed someone for no reason that I could tell right away, or why she does a lot of things, or why she kills certain people. It was a bit confusing for me, but I did really feel like because part of the problem is Charlie and Vita have these secrets, and I must say, this is another thing. Again, I like this comic. I think it's a good comic. I'm going to complain about some things. I didn't like that we don't know why the hit is out on Charlie and why Vita has some sort of dark thing in her past which is haunting her. To me, this is, in the Vita case, it's such a cliche. And when we find out what it was, it's done away with in one page in issue 10. Did we really need to wait 10 issues for this? They could have done this a lot earlier. And Charlie...
Well, they did. Sorry, they did hint to it in issue 1, because you had the VR sequence.
Yeah, but why? Come on. Does it have to be a hint? It's such a modern storytelling. It's such a Netflix kind of thing where we need to wait so long to get to this point. And it's not even that interesting when we get to it. And, Charlie's... I got to issue 12 and we still don't really know what she did that caused this this hit to be put out on her. And I really just don't think we need to follow Netflix rules. Just tell us. Maybe it would have helped me get deeper into it. But I feel like with Cersei, I didn't have those structural story issues. I didn't feel like, well, she does have some sort of secret thing going on, which is annoying. Just tell us. Somehow it was forgivable, again, because she was speaking directly to us. So I think she didn't... I think with Charlie and Vita, they're holding they keep talking to each other, and over again, we get this conversation where each one says to the other, tell me the truth. And the other says, tell me the truth. And you tell me every issue we have to go through this again and again. And we didn't have to do that with Circe. Circe was very like, here I am, and here's the kind of person I am. Here's what I think about this. Here's what I think about that. And it's written very beautifully, and for me, was refreshing. It was like a cool breeze coming through. Strangely, despite her being an assassin, her scenes are she's usually planning, and it's usually quiet, and she's sneaking around or something. Often that's the case, and not always, but it's not the frenetic, pedal to the metal, nonstop, either in dialogue or action that you get with the other two characters.
Yeah, she's like in the samurai movie, you've got the cool silent character slowly advancing throughout the movie who's going to make themselves known in the final act. But until then, we just got these scenes of them just stalking the main characters.
Right.
Occasionally killing people in a cool way. It's kind of Cersei's deal. And you're right, there's a sort of meditative quality to it. And that's why I enjoyed that sequence so much, because it was just so indicative of thoughtfulness on the part of this script about what all these devices are doing to us, and what this constant form of surveillance, what it means and what it could do to the mind. And Cersei seems to be somebody who's reconstituted herself and emerged on the other side of what she went through, like without any morality at all. But with fierce intent. Like if she wants to do something, she'll just do it.
Right. And
nothing's going to stop her. So yeah, there's the Terminator-like quality to her. But she'll occasionally do things which are, she's got her own agenda basically, and we don't know what it is yet.
Right. I was going to say something else about her, but I don't remember. Anyway.
Oh, sorry.
I loved all the side stories as well. Like sometimes we get in issue 2, we get the story about the house that Vita is living in, and how she ended up living there, and how she inherited it. And those little diversions I thought were always really good. And again, I think it was maybe they helped the pacing, those little diversions. And I think it's maybe the same with Circe too. It kind of takes you away from the nonstop bickering and quippy, snappy dialogue. I had this issue with Miss Marvel as well, which I honestly think I'm not the target audience for these books, but the dialogue is so constantly quippy and snappy and sarcastic, and nobody ever just makes a sentence. It was really, again, it was another thing that for me was, another problem is maybe I was reading 2 issues a day, which is probably too much. Maybe 1 a month, like release order is the way to do it. Because it's a lot to take in. And that dialogue for me was, I'm not saying, I'm going to use the word tiring. I don't mean the dialogue was badly written. The dialogue is perfectly written for what it is. But to have to listen to people talk like that, in that snappy way, constantly was hard work. And I don't want to say hard work in a bad way. I like this comic. It's a good comic. I keep trying to get around this, but there were things in there like that's like, oh, this is a comic for young people, or for Emmet, who can somehow absorb this dialogue, which I struggle with.
Yes, I'm not really young at heart in any way at all, and nor am I young in body. I've just aged in the past month. I like how offhand the characters are, but it doesn't feel like that ironic Whedon-like style that saturated the market for a good 10 years there now.
Right.
And I think when we talked about Saga, I thought that I seem to recall that was one of the points I raised, which is I'm sick and tired of characters talking like this all the time. Right. Like everybody's quippy and smart and everything. And again, that's kind of why I liked Vita and Charlie, because like Charlie is, terse and tired and just wants to get this job done, and she knows how to do things. And Charlie seems to be living on some other plane of reality.
Yeah.
But I don't think either of them come off as being, sort of like a writer's fanish version of what a witty person they think they are. Does that make sense? It's like when you read an X-Men comic and, the worst time as a reader is, oh God, someone's going to write Beast, which means someone's going to try to be smart now.
Right.
And it's the worst.
Well,
and I don't think anyone here was like that. I think people here were they were assholes. And that was the point of the dialogue.
Yes, I think you're right, but I think what I'm getting at is that every line is a line. It's a line. It's not like... They can't just go into a store and say, could I have a bottle of water, please? That's not a line you would ever read in this book. There would be some sarcastic way to deliver it. And you're right, maybe it's about being assholes. I will say there's a scene that worked brilliantly in issue 2. We get this huge, 2 or 3 page information dump about what Reaper is and why it's allowed to function in the world, which of course all the characters in the scene would know. And it's maybe the best information dump I've ever seen in anything, because these hackers are going on this long spiel about what Reaper is and how it functions, etc., etc. And Charlie's like, "Will you please shut up? Please shut up. I get it already. Stop explaining shit I already know. Stop it. Stop it." And she just keeps going on. It was so perfect. I absolutely loved it. And that was one point where when, she said, I think one line she says is, Charlie says, "Please punch them." That kind of sarcastic banter, which in every other issue was tiring to me. I thought in this scene was so well done, because it was the best. It was like we all know what's happening here. The writer knows, the audience knows, and it was kind of the best way to handle it, in a way that was very organic to the characters.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about the character of Trotter, who is sort of presented as an early antagonist in the series. He's one of these Reaper assassins who has a huge public following, and he's constantly performing for the camera. He's constantly affronting. And then, of course, there's this sort of schizophrenic aspect to his character, because his downtime self is entirely different. But he's still entirely sucked into this world, and he isn't trying to garner new fans and create new spectacle and true murdering people. And I don't know if this is a deliberate choice on the part of the art team, but I thought that he was drawn to resemble Chris Evans a bit, pre Captain America Chris Evans, when he was maybe doing the his Fantastic Four, the Losers days, right, where his online persona was a bit cocky. And then if you ever see an interview with Chris Evans, he just comes across as just very genuine and very quiet,
Right.
Seemingly very down to earth. I don't know. He's lived in another world for most of us mortals for a good 10 years now. But yeah, his character is interesting because in his bravado and in his performative sort of stunts, that also allows the comic to do a lot of world building.
Right.
To establish just how much of the culture is dominated by this thing. It's not just enough to have mobs of bloodthirsty people chasing our characters down streets. You've basically just got the guts of a zombie story then. You need some sort of cultural bellwether.
Right.
To give you a sense of the moral values of this world. And I think Trotter provides that.
Yeah.
Both in his own life and how he's got this sort of split in himself, and then in how the kind of cultural cachet he enjoys. Like, what does that say about the world that he can do this? So I think that's what that was about too. You're right. Like the exposition dumps and sort of the information saturation is both a really interesting way to let us know what this world is like, but also sort of relates this concept of we live on devices, we live in this virtual space, we are reducing ourselves to streams of data and information. This is what it's like. like this the scene where they're looking at the skyline in Los Angeles, and then it times out. It's like swipe for 30 more minutes of vintage Los Angeles skies.
Yeah,
amazing. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, I do love this. There was a stripper that shows up, and her stripper name is Dystopia, which I thought was just hilarious too. Yeah, I think for me the conflict was did it go deep enough into those things? I think you've gotten more out of the internet addiction. I don't know. That's not the word for it. The internet culture of it. And I feel like it could have gone even further, maybe. I think my takeaway is I think everybody should read at least the first 2 issues. And then if they can... And then they'll either be an Emmet or a Kumar. They'll either be like, I really love Charlie and I'm going to keep reading this, or they'll be like me and they'll be aggravated by her and maybe get out. But I mean, God, it's really good. It is amazing for what it is. I think I would have reordered some stuff, toned down some stuff, amped up some stuff, but I'm not. That's not fair. That's what I would have done with it.
Well, I was going to ask you, because, in your own writing career, you've written about hitmen and assassins and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was curious how you, as a result, would respond to this. This idea of publicly crowdsourced murder. Like, how does this sit with you, given that you clearly have an interest for this genre?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's on a razor's edge of plot, of reasonability. It's a great idea, and I actually think it's an awesome idea to have the idea of crowdfunding and assassination. But as I said at the very top of the show, I feel my impression going in was that it needs to be a much more extreme version of the future for something like that to exist. And then, of course, you pointed out to me that 3 weeks ago, or even if you think about the GameStop stuff from a week ago, it actually is not that inconceivable anyway. So, what do I know? I will add that I've been watching the TV series Killing Eve with my wife. Now, she watched the whole thing through 3 seasons, all of it once, and then she said, you got to watch this show. And I said, okay, so she's watching through a second time, and we're up to season 3, and I'm having some of the dialogue is always snappy, and I'm kind of like, I'm getting exhaustion with that too. So again, it's not the comic's fault, it's my fault, because I am behind the zeitgeist in terms of what people want to hear in their fiction, I think.
I find that interesting because I've also watched Killing Eve, and my response to it was completely different.
Right.
Like, I love Crowded.
Yeah.
I think I've made that clear to everyone listening. And I do think it speaks to our time. I think it speaks to our culture. It speaks to, the way Pat Mills is always saying that, why we should be writing for young people. Why aren't we writing stories for young people? And then he's released this comic, which, I enjoyed, but at the same time, I was like, this is written for myself as a young person.
Yeah.
In 1985.
Yeah.
This is not something which maybe a young person today would necessarily enjoy. Look, folks, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, please. Crowded does feel more relevant to the concerns of somebody who has existed in a virtual space their entire living life. Like their entire time on this earth, they've been aware of being able to easily contact and speak to and see and access any information they want.
Right. I wanted to ask you right at the top of the show. So you're not on Facebook anymore, or it's been a few years. Are you even on Twitter anymore?
I maintain the Hopscotch Friday account on Twitter because I still do a podcast with my partner Stevie called Hopscotch Friday. So if you're talking to that account on Twitter, you're probably talking to me. Right. I used to have a Twitter account under my name. and I deleted that as well.
Are you on anything else? Because my wife complains that I'm not on Instagram. Like, I've installed it, and she gets annoyed when I haven't liked her posts. I don't look at it. Like, I made an account, but I'm really an old man with all these, except for Facebook, which is for old people anyway.
I'm on LinkedIn. I have a website, emmetakuna.com. I have a website, and my thinking was, well, if I've got something to say, I can say it there.
Right.
Or if I do a podcast like this, I will link to it there.
Okay.
And that's my way to try and limit myself. But even with the Hopscotch Friday thing, it's not my name on the account. So somehow I've tricked myself into believing, well, then it's not you. You're representing a podcast. You're representing the interests of this podcast and the kind of topics that this podcast will touch on, hopefully. So I'm fooling myself, I know, because I'm still on social media. But I do think it's destructive because, and this is something that, like, I won't get into it, and I was going to talk about before about how much I didn't like Killing Eve, but that's a whole other conversation for another time. And I suspect you and I would agree on the reasons why. I also got quite tired of it.
Yeah.
But there was a book that came out very recently by Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And that's another book which I have on my bedside table, which I'm meaning to get to. But I read this review of it. It was a very critical review of it. But one of the things they took issue with Zuboff for was that apparently she was at the vanguard of all this tech literacy and sort of Silicon Valley utopianism 10 years ago, saying this is all going to be great, it's going to be fantastic, and now she's turned around and going, actually, it's all bad. And one of the main issues is that we use these tools and we are told they're free and we are generating revenue for other people. We're making money for someone somewhere. You think you're sharing a silly picture of a dog and drawing attention of how many people you follow you or who can see you to this dog. You've just generated how much ad revenue and created a profile. That's how it works. And there is a sense of, why are we doing this? Like, what's it for?
Yeah.
Like, I like to think that I'm a writer, I'm a podcaster. If I'm on social media, on some level, I'm trying to source information so I can do these things, or I'm trying to show what I've done in these spaces.
Right.
That is not true. That is not a true thing. I would like to think it is, but it's not. So I'm frustrated myself, and I kind of want to just be more productive with my own time. And I'm hearing that more and more from other people.
Right. Well, I was going to make this whole spurious argument about how maybe because I'm only on Facebook, I had less connection to this than you do. But it sounds like you have even less connection than I do.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think I have too much connection.
Okay. Right.
I think that's the problem. I think I recognize the disaffection in the world of this story, and I go, yeah, I think Sebela has sort of tracked a growing alienation, and he's led it down to, and again, it's this idea of peripheral plausibility. He's led us to this prospect of public assassination as a way to hopefully, and all storytelling should do this, change behavior and shock with the prospect of, well, yeah, if we keep going down this path, this is one of the possible forks. I don't necessarily believe that. I'm just saying that's what makes storytelling impactful.
Yeah.
Certainly what we've witnessed this month, just this past month, it's felt like months.
Yeah.
We've witnessed this broadening gulf between what is real and what is unreal. And people have died, people have lost all their money, people have taken back money from folks who were taking the piss for decades, and all of a sudden now it turns out if you short the system, the rich have a problem with you. They've been doing it for a long time. And that's because money itself is an abstract concept. And maybe we're becoming alienated from the concept of money itself when there's this realization that, oh shit, actually, none of this is real.
Yeah.
But fortunately, our entire life is dependent on us believing it's real.
Right.
So all of this is bad. And that's why I describe Crowded as pop nihilism, because I'm going, it's acknowledging that, but it's giving you a good time too. So let's have a laugh. Let's be like Dr. Strangelove riding the atom bomb down.
I think I've come around. I think you've convinced me. And my favorite episodes of Deconstructing Comics are ones where I've been shown that I was wrong. And I think you're right about pop nihilism now, because I think the fact that they don't actually, they never have a conversation about the morality of contributing, like not deep conversations the way they have conversations about everything else, convinces me that it really is a nihilistic view of it. It's just there, and it's the way people are, basically. It seems like is what it's saying in the way it's presented. Okay, please, I want you to have the last word on this. What do you want to say about it?
Folks, listen, there's a lot of books out there which deserve your hard-earned cash. If you haven't had the opportunity to check out Crowded, I'd recommend you do. The people who worked in it, let's give them a shout out one more time. Christopher Sebela, Stein, Ted Brandt, Triona Farrell, and Cardinal Rae have worked really, really hard, and they've produced something that's very different. And hopefully the conversation we've just had, myself and Kumar, will demonstrate to you that there's a lot going on here, and maybe you should dip in and try it yourself.
Excellent. How excellent is that? Perfect.
Crowded is published by Image. Want to support this podcast? You can help us out by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Don't forget our Fullmetal Alchemist podcast, The Law of Equivalent Exchange, is now in its own feed and available in the usual podcast outlets. Our review of Chapter 8 was released on Monday. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, my interview with Jed MacKay, a Canadian writer who's been turning out some great stories for Marvel in titles like Black Cat and Taskmaster. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.